Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, Kasten and Andrew Friedman address the Trevor Bauer situation and get into the payroll a little bit. Mookie Betts is bowling against some of the best bowlers in the world, and a small change the Dodgers made to the coaching staff. That's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans, welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. We can be found wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And make sure to subscribe so you never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time listener watching, I'm Vince Samperio. I'm usually joined by co-host Jeff Snider. Although he's not here, I'll be going solo today. And we actually have some things to talk about. Andrew Friedman and Kasten both spoke for the first time after the release of Trevor Bauer. And while they didn't say anything groundbreaking, they did give a little bit of insight into maybe what some people were talking about. I'll start with some comments from Andrew Friedman. He says, quote, "We feel good about our process and what led us to where we are now." He went on to say that Stan Kasten had more to say. Stan Kasten said, "I stand by our decision. I'm very comfortable with it." He said, when asked why it took so long, why they took, the full time before actually DFAing him and then ultimately releasing him, he says, quote, "We took the time to get as much input as we could to be sure we were making the right decision. That's what we did. We feel we did make the right decision." And then he went and said about the Trevor Bauer saying that that the Dodgers people told him they wanted him back. He said, "I'm not going to get into contradicting or agreeing with anything about what was supposed to be a private conversation. I'll just say within a very short time, we came back and made our decision. I think that speaks for ourselves. I think we all had strong feelings, and until we decided, those of us who made the decision, I guess anything was possible. But I think we all had a strong feeling all the way through the process of the right way to handle this." He was then asked about what they talked about the meeting and who represented the Dodgers at the meeting with Bauer. He said, quote, "I understand the question, but we wouldn't have even talked about the meeting except someone else put it out there. So I don't want to talk about what happened at the meeting. I don't think that's fair. I don't want to talk about what went on and what was discussed, what wasn't discussed, or who was there. But we did hear from him. I thought it was the right thing to do. I'm happy that we did it, along with everything else that we did to reach the best decision we could." Kasten also added that it was unanimous among the people that are charged with having to make this decision in terms of ultimately deciding to designate Trevor Bauer for assignment. He says it was an organizational decision. He added, "I will say I'm responsible for everything that happens here, but everyone who needed to be involved, was included in the discussion all along the way. It was unanimous at the end for sure. And as I said, we'll keep saying we feel strongly we made the right decision." So, all in all, I believe Stan Kasten thinks that the Dodgers made the right decision. And there's going to be disagreements on whether it was or wasn't the right decision among some Dodger fans. Stan Kasten did kind of address that, saying that all of you know this wasn't unanimous out in the real world among fans or other media or whatnot, but the decision we reached was unanimous among the people that were charged with having to make the decision. So, yeah, while he definitely understands that not everyone was the biggest fan of this decision, the Dodgers, the way he's laying it out, makes it seem that they were steadfast in what they wanted to do, that it wasn't really an issue, and that they didn't tell Trevor Bauer that they wanted him back. So whether that was Bauer fishing for, well, clout chasing in a sense, whether he was fishing for sympathy, whether he was fishing for teams to be like, well, the Dodgers did want me, but they just couldn't make that decision, but some other team could come and get it. Whatever it was, Stan Kasten saying the opposite. And between the two, I'm a little bit more inclined to believe Stan Kasten in that sense. But yeah, these were, the first public comments other than the statement the Dodgers released after Trevor Bauer was designated for assignment. So while I don't believe this is the end of anything Trevor Bauer related that we talk about in terms of comments or things of that nature, this is at least we have the people that were behind the decision, which is mainly Stan Kasten, and obviously Andrew Friedman probably was involved. They spoke, and while they didn't, say anything outlandish, they reaffirmed that it was an organizational decision. They reaffirmed that this was their decision. They believe they made the right decision, no real regrets, and that they didn't, believe that they wanted him to come back. So while I don't, like I said, while I don't think this is going to put it all behind us, I think it's good to have these comments, not let them loom any longer, especially ahead of the Fan Fest, which is on Saturday. Dodgers. I don't believe I believe one of the articles I read said that Kasten and Friedman wouldn't be at Fan Fest, but even then, you don't want the first public comments on stuff like this to potentially come from players or for players to be asked about it. Now, I don't know, if anybody is going to ask players about this decision or anything else, and I don't believe the players would really say anything anyways. But this weekend will be one of the first times where there's a lot of media with a lot of the players at FanFest. There may be some questions about it, so you don't really want the first public comments from the organization to come from anyone outside of those that made the decision. So this is good, and there's not really much analysis or insight to add to it. There is some analysis and insight to add to some comments that Andrew Friedman made about how this decision, or how the Trevor Bauer, if it loomed over their head, did they have any idea, did it affect how they approach the offseason? So he got into that. First, we're going to talk about FanDuel, because this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And this year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's even better because they have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. So download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. Like I mentioned in another episode, I'm taking Jalen Hurts first touchdown. I can't do it, but I would do it if I was betting on FanDuel. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from money line, point spreads, to who will score a touchdown. Jalen Hurts, sorry. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and easy to use, and you get all your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's get back in it. And like I mentioned, Andrew Friedman spoke a little bit more about the how the Trevor Bauer situation affected their offseason. And this is the quote that he had. He said, I mean, obviously it was a great unknown, but I don't think it impacted what we either did or attempted to do this offseason. There was a great unknown in terms of how it would play out and whether it would be scaled back entirely, upheld entirely, or somewhere in the middle, which we obviously had no idea about. But we compartmentalized that, and it didn't affect what we either did or tried to do. Now, while this seems, he did go on to add, I mean, the way it played out is obviously not what we thought, but with the way things have transpired, we feel good about our decision to move on and focus on the guys that we have and showing up to Camelback Ranch in a few weeks, ready to do all we can to win a championship this year. So Andrew Friedman is claiming that all of this, the 22 million or any money that they would have had to pay him, didn't affect the offseason, wasn't looming over their heads. And then he did add that the Dodgers weren't going to trade from their major league roster in order to get under the luxury tax. It says Friedman said he doesn't expect to make any moves to get the payroll under the threshold for the luxury tax. And whether you believe him or not is entirely up to you. I'm inclined to believe him because really, as we mentioned, the real only way they could do it is by trading someone off the major league roster. Max Muncy, Chris Taylor probably make the most sense. They're the ones that make the most money. Or Blake Trinan, who they would have to attract a prospect to, which I don't think they're entirely in love with. But it does, and beg the question: okay, if this didn't affect what the offseason plan was, then why did the offseason go the way it did? And it's very possible that the Dodgers, the big money shortstops, they didn't want to get into those type of years, or maybe we don't know if they had how deep conversations went with any of the free agent shortstops. We know that they were linked to them. We know that whatever the case was, but we don't really have too much insight. There was the one report on well, that was for Aaron Judge. So, but yeah, I mean, realistically, the Dodgers weren't trying to hand out 13-year deals, 11-year deals. That probably took them out of the shortstops anyways. The starting pitching is a little interesting for me in terms of there wasn't any. I don't believe there was any like ridiculous contracts given. At least two guys that were top tier. Carlos Rodon might be a little bit more out, might have been a little bit out of what they expected for him to get, and not necessarily out of their pay range or out of their range, but more necessarily out of what they were willing to spend on him. So, you know, it would be interesting to know from Friedman, okay, but not saying that Trevor Bauer and that money that was potential money that had to pay to him was looming over the team. Why was this the way they went about the offseason? And as we've said before, the Dodgers still going to be a good team. The Dodgers did make some moves that could pan out very well. Noah Syndergaard could become, a top pitcher again. Maybe not a Cy Young candidate, but a top pitcher again, or could be at least as good as Tyler Anderson was last year. Shelby Miller could become that new reliever ace that they, could be the Evan Phillips of this year. Very possible. JD Martinez was an all-star before the first half of, or was an all-star, struggled a little bit after the all-star break, but as I mentioned before, his September and October were really, really good. He was back to being a really good hitter. So he could, in theory, be better than Justin Turner was, who was the more primary DH for the Dodgers last year. So all these moves that they made make sense. It's just when you compare them to the grand, scheme of things, and Carlos Rodon and all the shortstops, and Aaron Judge and all these other people, and some of the trades that were made. It's it's like, okay, then was this the plan all along? To let younger players showcase themselves and see if they have what it takes. Was giving Miguel Vargas full rope for this season always part of the plan? That probably was having Gavin Lux be the everyday shortstop part of the plan? I don't think that entirely was the plan, but I do think once they kind of got priced out in terms of years with some of these shortstops, that did become the plan. And anything else would be to supplement that. And, it's not the worst decision in the world. The Dodgers didn't have the worst offseason. It's just a bad offseason when you compare what they lost to what they picked up. But it's also a matter of putting it in perspective. Yeah, what they lost, even if Trey Turner was a 6 WAR player, and he wasn't, but let's just say he was a 6 WAR player. Okay, so the Dodgers lose him. They 105 games, and Tyler Anderson's let's just say a 3 WAR player. Okay, 102 wins, and Justin Turner and whoever else that they lost this offseason all added up to like 10 WAR. Okay, so they're at a 92 wins. Okay, but now you picked up Syndergaard, who could be worth 2 WAR on the low end. Okay, so now you're back up to 94 wins. Now that's not how WAR works, I know, but I'm just saying, while they did lose a lot, the guys they're gaining could benefit or will benefit from being with the Dodgers, and could, outperform what they did last year. So if you lost 10 guys at 24 WAR, whatever it was that the Dodgers lost, and you only added 4 players that combined for, 5 WAR. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lose all that, because they could be better next season. JD Martinez could be a 4 WAR player next year. At a DH spot, maybe not, but possible offensively. Like I said, Noah Syndergaard could be a 3 to 4 to 5 WAR pitcher, and you're getting back some of that value that wasn't accounted for just by saying, "Oh, this is what they lost and this is what they signed." It's more about what are these signed guys going to do? What are these young guys going to do? We know what's Miguel Vargas going to do. What's Gavin Lux going to do at shortstop? Can Chris Taylor figure out his swing again and be good or at least competent? Will Max Muncy be competent the entire year? Get back to who Max Muncy is. You add in 35 Max Muncy home runs, which is pretty much what he averaged when he was rolling, and that changes the dynamic of the offense a little bit. Last year he was able to have a really good second half and good toward the end of the year, but it took him a while to get there. Chris Taylor striking out 35% of the time last year. He can even just cut that to 30% of the time. And of that 5% that he cuts off, some of those become hits and home runs and things of that nature. Then your offense switches a little bit there. If Miguel Vargas figures things out, or at the very least is hot early on before pitchers entirely figure him out, and then he makes adjustments the rest of the way, that's going to help. If Gavin Lux is recovered from his injury and plays like he did before the injury last season, then that's a competent, pretty good shortstop. It's not necessarily maybe an all-star shortstop because the shortstop is pretty loaded at this time, but it's an above average shortstop. And defensively, where the Dodgers are trusting in him that he'll figure it out. And there's a lot of things like that in the outfield. Those are probably where the most question marks are, because you don't know what you're going to get out of Chris Taylor yet. And then James Outman, Trace Thompson. Trace Thompson was a fun story last year, but we saw in the postseason he didn't do anything, and he was striking out a lot, and that's why he was probably out of the league or in and out of the league for a few years after he left the Dodgers. You're counting, and not that I don't believe that he'll be good again, but it's just a matter of, okay, I don't know how much the Dodgers really contributed to that, or was it just a matter of, hey, these guys are, teams are throwing Trace Thompson fastballs or leaving hanging breaking balls that they normally don't do, and that's why he was so good? Or was it a matter of, did the Dodgers do something? Is he more comfortable in LA? I don't know, but these are all questions that are valid in terms of the Dodgers outfield. And James Outman, like we've talked about him a lot, we don't know exactly what he could be, but what the Dodgers have gotten out of center field last year has been below average. So if Outman and Thompson can, if they're a platoon or whatever the case, if they're just average hitters, then the Dodgers are going to get more offensively than what they got from the position. Maybe not power wise. Trace does have the power. Outman does have power. At the very least, Bellinger kept the home runs total, not like terrible. They weren't great. But if they can just hit the ball, that's all that really matters. So while there's a lot of questions, and while the offseason didn't quite go as expected, maybe this is the offseason that was always coming. The Dodgers were going to be in on the shortstops and in on starting pitching until they got priced out. They got priced out of Verlander. And priced out, like I said before, priced out doesn't mean that they can't afford it. It's just a matter of, do they want to pay that? Do they want to have that much money committed in terms of, hey, maybe there is a chance to get under the luxury tax and whatever the case. But I believe if the plan was always to get under the luxury tax, they wouldn't even have been linked to Justin Verlander or any of the shortstops, and they were, and it didn't quite work out, and that's where we're at now. So, all right, let's finish up. Dodgers made a little change on their coaching staff, and then we'll talk about Mookie Betts and Mookie Betts being a really good bowler. But thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB Prospects with host Lindsey Crosby. He's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. You can find it wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All right, so Dodgers made a small change to the coaching staff involving Bob Guerin or Bob Jaron. I don't entirely remember how you pronounce it, but Bob Jaron will no longer be the bench coach. He is transitioning to Major League Field Coordinator, and the new bench coach is now Danny Lehman. So Danny Lehman, the last few years, has been the game planning and communications coach. He joined the Dodgers in 2018, and then, or he joined the team in 2018 in that role, was a special assistant the next year, and then back to his game planning role the last few years. Now he's the bench coach. I don't know how much this is actually going to change. Well, we know Bob Guerin was one that him and his rule book and things of that nature. I don't know if he's still going to be in the dugout. If he is, he'll still be able to contribute in that way. Danny Lehman, coming from game planning, coordinating, he's used to being a part of all these things as well. I believe he would. I don't believe there to be really any big adjustment or big change, and a new right hand man for Dave Roberts. The rest of the coaching staff stays the same. We got the young goat Mark Pryor, Van Scoyoc hitting coach, Aaron Bates hitting coach, Clayton McCullough first base coach, Dino Ebo at third base, and Josh Bard bullpen coach. So no other changes there. Danny Lehman now coaching, now bench coach. Bob Guerin moves into a new role. Until we really see it play out, we don't know exactly how it's going to be, but that's where he goes. All right, let's finish off the episode talking about Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts is competing in the PBA US Open Championship in Indianapolis. And Mookie Betts is one of the 108 entrants in the tournament, and he's not doing so bad. Uh, After Tuesday, Mookie Betts was tied on the scoreboard with the number one bowler in the world, Jason Belmonte. He was tied for 19th among his 36-member squad and tied for 61st overall. So yeah, while he's not a professional bowler, so he's not in the top, but he's keeping up with number one bowler in the world who's having struggles. So what my cousins told me, who are now into the bowling world and are really big into bowling, I guess the lane conditions over there are not that great. I think they said it's really slick or whatever the case is. So that's why the number one bowler in the world struggling so much in Belmonte. But Mookie Betts is playing pretty well, considering the fact that he doesn't get to put all his time and effort into this, and considering these lane conditions that are making it tough, not so bad. Mookie did receive an exemption into this tournament via the U.S. Bowling Congress. He's going to bowl 8 more. He bowled 8 more games on Wednesday. He's going to bowl 8 more games on Thursday. And if he makes it into the top 24, then he'll make it into match play this weekend. But even if he doesn't advance, the fact that he was allowed in by the Bowling Congress, U.S. Bowling Congress, which sounds very prestigious, and that they don't just allow anyone to get in, and the fact that he's competing is pretty cool. And I remember last year when Mookie Betts bowled 300, when the Dodgers had the days off in between end of the season and then LDS, and after the fact, people were like, "Oh, Mookie should have been working on his swing. Mookie should have been doing this. Mookie should have been doing that." No player, no, I'll say this: no player should, or no player does do baseball 100% of the time. You need to have hobbies. You need to have a personal life. You need to have, you know, it's like with anything. Obviously, this job's a little bit different. They're not working 8-hour shifts, but do you put in work outside of work to be better at your job? Some people might, but for the most part, probably not. And for Mookie, he has a hobby. It's a sport. He likes it. He plays it. He's very good at it. And I don't see an issue with it. You know, it's always going to look bad when players go out and do something in their personal life and then they lose or struggle or something like that. And it's like, oh man, social media, social media coaches will be like, oh, they should have been working out, just because Mookie Betts went bowling on a Sunday or whatever it was, or Saturday night, whatever it was. Okay, say he doesn't go bowling. He's not going to be in the batting cage anyway. So, I don't understand why people expect that to be, I don't expect why people expect players to be like, oh, it's a Friday night. Yeah, I'm going to be in the cages the entire night and then I'm going to sleep. No, and for guys like Mookie that know their swing, it's a little bit different as well. So just if you're a fan and you ever thought this way, I would just recommend, seeing a different perspective on what things are. Speaking of fans, great loving fans. I've seen some beef between Dodger fans and Padre fans on Twitter, more specifically over FanFest. Padre fans are flabbergasted, or whatever the word is, that Dodgers are charging people to take selfies with players, to get autographs with players. They have a package that's like $2,000 that gives you a lot of different experiences. Uh, there's like $60 to hold a bat, and whatever the case, blah 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 blah. And Dodger fans, well, first of all, I would recommend just don't engage. Now, am I guilty of engaging at times? Sometimes, not so much anymore, but before, yeah, maybe a little bit. But it's one thing to engage and it's one thing to be engaged. I'll engage like once and then I'll just leave it. I won't be engaged where I'm back and forth or whatever, then blah, 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 because it doesn't matter. But, speaking of FanFest, do I believe some of the prices are a bit much? Yes. But it's going to the Dodgers Foundation. It's, for charity. And I think the one thing I've seen that Padre fans, I don't believe they understand, because they're making the argument, oh, Padres Fan Fest is free. Dodgers Fan Fest is free too. But if you want some of these VIP experiences, what they call them, then you have to pay. And that's just matter. Like, if you're going to Padres Fan Fest for free, are you getting a selfie with the player? Are you getting autographs? Sure, some people might. And also, some people might go to Dodgers Fan Fest and get free autographs and free selfies, because the players will be walking around and sometimes, you catch them. So, yeah, first of all, Dodger fans, just don't engage. It's not worth it. Not worth it with any fan base, really, but especially the Padres. And I don't know. For me, it's hard. I'm not one to really trash talk too much, just because, one, I'm superstitious and I'm going to jinx things. Two, because what's the point? What Padre fans, if you say, oh, you guys have never seen you guys win a championship, to me, that argument doesn't hold weight as much, just because, like, okay, the Padres beat us in the playoffs. Like, that's more relevant to me, of a trash talk than, oh, your team's never won a World Series. I don't know. That's just my opinion, but no, to each their own. Like I said, if you see Padre fans, just don't engage. If you're going to FanFest, have fun, do what you want to do, spend money if you want to spend, and that's the way it goes. That's all it is. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he can be found wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube, which is how you can find us if you search Locked On Dodgers, which is also how you can find us if you are on Twitter or on Instagram. I know our Instagram has been dormant for a little while, but we're gonna get it. We're gonna get it back going. We're gonna get it going again, and we're gonna be a little bit more active on Twitter this year. So engage with us, and let's get this thing going. You can also get a hold of us. You can get a hold of Jeff on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vince Samperio. The DMs are open on both of our personal accounts and on the Locked On Dodgers accounts. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car, or if you're at home. Tell your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.